You set foot on foreign soil. Only this land isn't ruled by any country or government. In this land we celebrate music. In this land we celebrate games. In this land we celebrate those who compose video game music. Welcome to the VGMbassy. Welcome, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the VGMbassy. This is a show centered around video game music and the amazing online community of fans and podcasters that enjoy it. My name's Ed, and on each episode I'll take the role of Prime VGM Minister and invite a guest VG Ambassador onto the show to share with us their own video game music culture. Or I may share a part of my culture on a solo show, like today. So we've got some top of the show business to discuss, my friends. 61 episodes into the VGMbassy, and I am finding myself falling behind. Not necessarily burning out, but with the quarantine stuff going on, and there's some other stuff going on in my life, it's been really hard to coordinate with a new guest host every 2 weeks, put together a show, edit it, get it out, blah, blah, blah. Work has been absolutely ridiculous lately with half of our team at home, half of our team in the office. One of our team members is working from home permanently, so I'm like the only tech in the building for the entire town. It's rough. So, I'm not going to, at this point, make shows happen less often. What I am considering doing right now is doing more solo shows, shorter solo shows like this one, just some cool stuff that I enjoy. I'll talk a bit about it, share some really awesome music, and hopefully it will be fun for you to listen to. It'll be easier for me to produce. I'll, keep the content factory churning. And of course, I will have guest VG ambassadors on as often as I can. But that may also leave my guest VG ambassadors and me a little more space and time to put together more quality shows so I can devote as much time as I can to it. I hope everyone out there is doing well. These are rough times, and I'm sure that not everyone's situation is the same. I've been playing a ton of indie games lately. So my youngest son has just decided, with all the stress going on, that he doesn't want to sleep by himself in his bed anymore. So my wife is basically going to bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock with him. And then she used to come back downstairs once he was asleep, and she and I would watch a movie, watch a TV series, etc., etc. She is just staying in his bed now. So I basically, once 8 o'clock rolls around, I've got the basement to myself. So I've been playing a lot more games because she doesn't really play very many games. And I felt that it would be cool if I shared some of the awesome music from some of the games I've been playing lately. We've got some really good stuff lined up for the show. It's just 6 pieces. This should be a much shorter show than usual, but I feel like the tracks that I've picked out are really good from some games that you may not have heard of that I really recommend you guys play. And of course, I'll talk a little bit about the gameplay, a little bit about the composers, all the stuff that you're used to hearing on the VGMbassy. That said, let's start off with our first piece of music. This is a game from Devolver Digital, and it's been their darling this past season. They did not obviously do an E3 presentation because there was no E3 this year, but they did a pre-recorded kind of Nintendo Direct kind of thing like they've been doing, and this game was like their biggest push, and rightfully so. It's really, really good, and it's got a really creepy, really good soundtrack as well. It's out in a whole bunch of systems, so hopefully you can play it if you'd like. We're going to listen to a track called Appetite for Destruction. This was released on the game Carrion. This came out on the Xbox One, PC, and Switch just about a month ago in 2020, composed by Chris Velasco. Let's take a listen. Okay. I just realized that I just talked a whole lot about anxiety and stress, and then I play you this song, so my apologies. This is a nail biter of a track. It is like the audio version of Fear. Just heavy, chunky, really harsh sound effects and percussion and trilled kind of violin-ish synthy sounds, weird crawling audio effects and stuff. Very cinematic, but also it has kind of a video game quality to it as well, I guess. Fits the mood of the game extremely well. It's a game in which you are the monster and you are fighting against the humans. You're a alien entity spore kind of thing, this pinkish blob, and you're being kept deep underground in this gigantic fortress, and you're being kept deep underground for good reason. You are an extremely dangerous, mutating, gelatinous blob of sinew, and you love to eat humans. And so you see one day that there's an opportunity to escape, and you do so, and the entire game is you making your way out of this giant Metroid-esque facility, 2D side-scrolling pixel art, and you need to sneak up on humans and kill them and fight against humans that are ready for you, and just basically make your way out of this gigantic maze. It's really cool. The monster that you take control of starts off kind of smallish, and as you go through the game, as you consume more humans, you start getting more powers. You get giant spindly arms that you can use to impale people. You grow extra eyes and extra fang-filled mouths, and grow in size and grow in elasticity. So by the end of the game, I'm assuming you're just this giant slippery mass of muscle and arms and teeth and gross stuff, and it sounds so fun. I've only played the first level so far, and it's cool. It's a little bit stealthy. I imagine some of that stealth goes away once you become formidable, and it becomes more like the scientists and kind of unwitting soldiers that you're killing are now going to be on high alert and are going to be ready to face off. I've seen screenshots of the game where guys with like giant flamethrowers trying to set you on fire and locking you down in between doors and stuff to trap you. So it looks really, really cool. And with music like this, the atmosphere is just 100% complete. If you're not sure about it, watch some video. I think you'll be swayed. The animation is really good. Even the humans that you're fighting against feels like, they climb up on ledges and run through doors and stuff, almost like animation from Flashback and stuff. So I've been having some fun with it. I can't wait to play more of it. And the soundtrack really grabbed me. The soundtrack is composed by Chris Velasco. He is a big, big name in the world of video game music, especially modern video games. I'm actually surprised that he was working on kind of a smaller indie game like this one. I knew I recognized his name from somewhere when I first looked up the soundtrack credits, and it's because he is the composer of most of the God of War series. He's also composed the music to the TMNT games, the Mortal Kombat and the Injustice games, some music for StarCraft 2. He's composed for the Mass Effect series, Warhammer, Might and Magic, the Soul Calibur series, Minecraft, Company of Heroes, Bloodborne, Overwatch, Resident Evil 7, Darksiders 3. So, yeah, and then for all of these gigantic AAA games, and then here I am doing this little pixel art, side-scrolling indie game. Is very, very interesting. And I'm glad he did it, because he, like I said, he creates atmosphere like no other, and it really improves the feel of the game. I don't think, even though the visuals are retro pixel style, that a chiptune soundtrack would have made the game feel as stressful and scary as it is. It's interesting because you're identifying with the humans. You're like, oh my god, I feel so sorry for you, but at the same time you're like, but I need to kill you to get out. So you're almost playing as your enemy, which is kind of a weird, kind of screws with your head a little bit as you're playing the game. I really like that feeling. Chris Velasco is the owner and founder of Monarch Audio. Carrion is developed by Phobia Game Studio. They are out of Poland, and I think you're going to see some more of them, because so far as I can tell, this game is selling pretty darn well. So, chalk up one more amazing game for Devolver Digital. Okay, let's move on to our next track. Very different feel for this one. This is a shoot 'em up that went early access on Steam in 2018 and just came out of early access this year, a couple months ago in 2020. We're going to listen to a track called Armada from Jets and Guns 2. And if you enjoy rocking out, you will be rocking out hard, because this one's composed by none other than Machinae Supremacy. Let's hit it. Such good stuff. That was Armada from Jets and Guns 2, released on the PC in early access originally in 2018, composed by Swedish Sid metal band Machinae Supremacy. Totally rockin' soundtrack. It was really, really hard to pick a track from this soundtrack to share on the show. I picked this one because there's a lot of dancey music and a lot of really rockin' metal music on this soundtrack, and I feel like this one does a little bit of both. You get some of that really well-produced techno at the beginning, it slides right into that wailing guitar work, and then kind of goes back into the dance motif. Really, really good stuff, and it, again, just like in Carrion, the music really helps make the game what it is. Jets and Guns 2, obviously, is the sequel to Jets and Guns, which was originally released for Windows back in 2006. Machinae Supremacy also did the soundtrack for that one, which I was unaware of until just recently, so it's only natural they came back to write the soundtrack for this one. The game was developed by a studio called Rake in Grass, and they're an independent team based in Prague, in the Czech Republic, and they develop shareware software for Windows, PC, and Mac. So we're getting a little international flavor on this show so far. We've got a dev house from Poland and one from the Czech Republic. Jets and Guns 2 is a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up game that's not necessarily bullet hell. I really tend to like the shoot-'em-ups that have a lot of kind of like RPG elements to them, almost, or kind of like roguelite elements to them. Not roguelite in the sense that the levels are randomized, but more like you need to upgrade yourself over time, and you go back and replay stages and find things that you didn't find or do better on them in order to earn more, to get onto more levels. So, like, in a nutshell, there's some grinding involved, which is fine because it's, in my opinion, really fun to kind of go through a level while you're very weak and kind of struggle and get through it by the skin of your teeth, and then like get your revenge later on by powering yourself up and just blasting your way through it, being like, haha, you guys gave me a hard time, but this time it's the other way around. It's super fun. Jets and Guns 2 has really, really nice, colorful 2D graphics, a whole bunch of different levels to play with, lots of different environments. Like I said, again, a crazy soundtrack, some really deep configuration abilities. You've got the ability to have 3 forward-facing weapons and 1 rear-facing weapon. You have a kind of like a processor, I guess, that handles all of your weapon fire, and it tends to overheat after a while, so you can assign cooling devices to each of your weapons to kind of mitigate that overheating. You can buy generators, you can buy missiles, you can buy bombs, you can configure them in any way you want. There are a ton of weapons. I want to say between 35 and 50 weapons that you can purchase as you go through the game, and that's not including all the bombs and missiles. I'm just talking about like the forward firing weapons. It's really insane how many different configurations you can put on your ship. The ship is very big, the enemies are very big, it's got some great animation, lots and lots of different enemies, and like I said, you know, you can keep powering yourself up, and kind of like, almost like Zelda Breath of the Wild, you can kind of choose when you want to get through the last level. So if you want to wait until you're super overpowered and just kind of cruise through the whole game, you can do that if you want to grind a lot, or you can try to make it through on a minimal loadout. So it's a good way to challenge yourself. It's a good way to kind of play around with different configurations and see what you like. I'm having so much fun with it, and I really love the soundtrack. Worth going out and listening to the whole thing. I really like the fact that Machinae Supremacy is kind of in the middle there between really authentic heavy metal and power metal, and they also really know how to do the electronic stuff, and they integrate them so well together. I mentioned that they were a SID metal band. I mean, they still call themselves that, and most of their music uses the SID chip from the Commodore 64. Lately, they've been using less and less of it, and this soundtrack in particular seems to really stray away from using those Commodore 64 sounds in favor of some more modern keyboard sounds and modern tones. So, still really good. They're a very talented band, and you should check them out too. So I think I've said all I can about that. Go check out Jets and Guns too. It's not very expensive. You can find it on Steam, and I think you'll really enjoy it. We're gonna move on to one of my sleeper soundtrack hits of the year. This was a game that I probably wouldn't have given the time of day had it not come out on Apple Arcade, which is a $5 a month service that you can subscribe to for your iPhone and iPad, and it's a large selection of games that are free. So I was kind of looking for a puzzle game to play on my iPad because I enjoy using it as just to kind of pass the time. I found this game called Grindstone, and it looked fun, so I checked it out, and the soundtrack from Sam Webster wowed me. I really, really love this soundtrack. We're going to listen to a selection called Temple Tip. And this soundtrack has a bit of a hip-hop feel with a little bit of fantasy elements. I think a lot of you, especially some of the hip-hop fans out there, will really enjoy this soundtrack. So here's a sample. So good. That was Temple Tip from the game Grindstone, which came out September of 2019 on iPhone, iPad, and Mac OS. Such a good soundtrack. This is just a small sample of the really cool tunes that you will find in this game. Like I said, I kind of found this game by accident, started playing. My volume, I usually keep my volume on my iPad kind of low, and I'm listening to the music just kind of barely audible in the background, and I'm hearing these really cool beats, and I'm like, oh man, this sounds kind of cool. So I raised the volume on my iPad a couple notches and realized that this music is really, really good. And as I'm playing more and more levels, I'm hearing more and more tunes, and I'm like, this soundtrack is gigantic, and it's also all really good. So went out, found the soundtrack on Bandcamp, bought the lossless version, and I've been bopping it in my car ever since. Some really, really good bass lines, as you can tell from this track. This one, like I said, as I kind of did with Jets and Guns 2 as well, kind of tried to pick a track that is indicative of a lot of the different sounds in the game. So this one really starts off with a very fanciful kind of, just kind of like staccato, twinkly almost notes. And then you get that grindy bass line, you get that kind of hip-hop style beat all rolling in together. They work really well together too. It's not your typical soundtrack that you would find for a puzzle game, but this puzzle game is kind of unique in a sense. So first of all, developed by Capybara Games, you might recognize that name from the guys who did Super Brother, Swords and Sorcery. So it's got that kind of Cartoon Network, Adult Swim vibe to the art. There's really solid colors, thin lines, fantastic animation in this game. It looks like you're watching fully animated cartoon characters. And you play as George, and George is living in his house with his wife and his kid, and he's a huge gentleman, big mustache, blue skin, and he's looking up at the crack in his ceiling and seeing the snow coming through, and he decides to get up, and he decides to climb Grindstone Mountain. And Grindstone Mountain is literally there so adventurers can collect treasure and hopefully earn some money for their family. At the bottom of Grindstone Mountain is an inn, and it's a 3-story building, so it's got a bar on top, it's got a weapon shop, and it's got an armor shop, very RPG-esque, and it's there that you can heal yourself, get new weapons, get new armor. The gameplay is really simple. You see a rectangular grid on the screen. The rectangular grid is made up of lots of different kinds of monsters of different colors, and George can slice through these monsters extremely violently as long as they're all the same color. He can go from side to side, up to down, left to right, diagonal, and every once in a while, if he makes a chain of 10 monsters or more, he will generate a grindstone, and the grindstone will let you change color in the middle of your move. So you can chain 4 yellow monsters together, hit a grindstone, and then go for 7 more blue monsters. And there are other guys called jerks that usually fall into the stage, and they, you can only kill them if you've sliced through 10 monsters on your way to them. There's giant plants with tentacles that come out, and the tentacles get longer once per turn. There are spiked pits and conveyor belts and huge bosses that you have to knock giant bombs into. It's actually a lot of fun, and there was 150 levels in the original version of the game that came out. Beat the whole thing. Kind of a cool twist ending, I won't spoil it, but it changed the whole way that you see the game. And they just released a major update for it with a whole bunch more levels, some extra side levels, and as I was looking for Sam Webster's information on the web, I noticed that he just released a Volume 2 of the Grindstone soundtrack, so I know where I'm going and what I'm buying as soon as I'm done recording this podcast. Sam Webster's a Canadian. He's from Toronto. I don't have much information on him. From the web, all I can tell is that he has created music for this game and this game alone. His Twitter bio simply says, "I made the music for Grindstone by Cappy Games." I want to hear more from him, for sure. So if you have Apple Arcade, are considering getting Apple Arcade, for $5 a month, this game will give you probably at least a couple months worth of fun. I've got another Apple Arcade game actually coming up next. This one maybe is more for more of you traditional gamers out there, especially considering the composer. So we're going to listen to the credits theme from the game Spidersaurs, and this was a WayForward game with music from none other than Harumi Fujita. Curious yet? Let's take a listen. Ooh, quite an intimidating roar at the end of that tune. That was the credits theme from Spidersaurs, released on iOS and macOS in 2019 for Apple Arcade, composed by the infamous Harumi Fujita. Also not chiptune music. So what do I say about this one? First of all, this soundtrack is impossible to find anywhere. Fujita appeared as the composer on the game, courtesy of Bravewave, her record label, and so it would seem like a no-brainer for Bravewave to release the soundtrack from the game. However, that never materialized. All I could find on the web was a Twitter post in which a fan of the game asked if WayForward would be releasing the soundtrack anytime soon, and WayForward themselves replied with, "We don't have any plans to, but maybe sometime in the future." That was over a year ago, so I sincerely doubt we're going to be hearing any of this music anytime soon. Fortunately, I was able to get the credits music by hooking a line up directly to my iPad and recording it onto my PC. So apologies if the quality isn't as good as some of the other lossless tunes we'll be listening to on the show today, but I really wanted to share this one because, like I said, the soundtrack is very rare. The composer obviously is someone who we haven't heard from in a while in terms of video game music, so this was a nice return to form for her. And the game is really cool and really fun as well. I also at least like the fact that the credits theme is one of those kinds of themes that incorporates lots of music from the game into the credits theme, so at least you guys have a good feel about what the soundtrack is all about. A lot of really nice dance beats with funky guitar work over it, some nice keyboard runs, horns, like she really went all out with this soundtrack. Very complex and busy music, which kind of fits the theme of the game. So the game is a cartoonish send-up on Contra, more or less. I'd say maybe Contra 3, the Alien Wars, is the best analog for this game. You play as either Adrian or Victoria, and they are taste testers at a laboratory run by the company Ingest. And there's a worldwide food shortage, so Ingest starts creating they start creating creatures that are hybrids of spiders and dinosaurs, hence the name Spidersaurs. But they create these creatures simply to eat them. They keep them in the labs, and they are so meaty and supposedly so delicious that they raise them, kill them, and then they feed the world with them. So I guess they're very easy to grow or something. I don't really know. It doesn't really go that much into detail. But there's a security breach. The Spidersaurs get free, surprise, surprise, and it's up to Adrian and Victoria to take up their weapons and side-scrolly run through the laboratories and the surrounding areas and defeat all of the wayward Spidersaurs. Lots of fun, lots of different weapons, wall crawling, you name like some abilities from the Contra series and they're basically here as well. Really stylized, cartoony graphics. They were designed by the artists from Inti Creates, so you kind of get a feel for like the art style. A lot of really good voice acting and dialogue between all of the characters. Gigantic bosses, like the first boss that you meet is the cross between a tarantula and a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and unique bullet patterns, unique attack patterns. It's fun. It is a lot of fun. And for those of you who are like, well, I can't play on touch controls, well, the really cool thing about the latest iOS update for iPads and phones that came out with Apple Arcade is the ability to natively connect your PS4 and Xbox One controllers to the devices. So go to the settings screen, you put your PS4 controller in pairing mode, it detects it immediately, you start up the game, and boom, you've got yourself a little console sitting in front of you, Switch style. So tons of fun to sit your iPad or your phone down in front of you, grab a controller, and just play like you would play on a console or a Switch in undocked mode. Having a blast with this one. You don't need the touchscreen at all to play it. And it's a great way for non-mobile gamers to kind of use their mobile devices to game if you choose to, especially if you got both of those, a controller and an iPad sitting around. You can combine them and create a game system that you are more comfortable playing. Anyways, really enjoyed it. Harumi Fujita hasn't really done much else aside from Spidersaurs. She had been out of the composing business for quite a while. Her last game before this was Magical Tetris Challenge in 2000, so that's 20 years gone from composition. So she wrote the soundtrack to Spidersaurs, and then she did some production work on Streets of Rage 4. So hopefully she's getting back in the business, because this is a fantastic tune. And she's got such a pedigree of amazing music. Bionic Commando, Final Fight, Punky Skunk, 1943 Kai, Ghosts and Goblins, lots of good Capcom stuff. So hopefully we'll be hearing more from her in the future. Alright, we've got one more mobile game left. Actually, this game came out on mobile, and it's also out on Switch, maybe PC as well. I don't know, but it's a really fun shoot 'em up. This one is called Pathfinder from the game Black Paradox, and it's composed by IHR, otherwise known as Inward, Hanzo, and Randy. Be right back. Alright, shut down your flux capacitor. That was Black Paradox. The track was called Pathfinder, composed by Inward, Hanzo, and Randy, aka IHR. That was released in 2018. It's available on iOS, macOS, the Switch, PS4, Windows, and Xbox One. It's a roguelike, side-scrolling shoot 'em up, and it's got a fantastic synthwave soundtrack. This is one of my favorites from the game. It's a little bit more on the modern side as far as synthwave goes. A lot of the other tracks on here are kind of 80s throwback, the typical kind of synthwave stuff, but this one had a really nice grindy bass line, more of a modern kind of dubstep-y feel almost, maybe a little more drum and bass than dubstep, but lots of fun to listen to. The soundtrack, obviously for shoot 'em ups, really kind of carries the game and sets the tone for it, and they did a really good job on this as well. As with most of the soundtracks in this show, you can head over to Bandcamp and purchase the full soundtracks if you want. I think I'll put links to the Bandcamps in the show notes, so if you want direct access to them, go check them out. The cool thing about Bandcamp is usually you can listen to all the songs on the website before you actually decide to purchase them, so you know exactly what you're buying, and hopefully after listening to stuff like Jets and Guns and Black Paradox, you'll be convinced to throw the composers a few dollars here and there. So, this game was published and developed by Fantastico Studio. They are an Italian developer. We are really getting worldly today here on the old VGMbassy. And it's like I said, a rogue-like shoot 'em up. So you are a bounty hunter. You're able to travel in time by manipulating black holes' energy. You have to defeat the Hellraisers. They're the most cruel criminal organization in space, and it's got 7 branches, each with their own leaders. So 7 levels of mayhem. Roguelite in terms of the game means it plays kind of similar to like Dead Cells, where there are individual levels in the game, but the contents within those levels are randomized. So like your first level will always be kind of a spacey asteroid belt, and you'll always fight the Insane Brothers at the end of it. And then your second level will always be a particular theme with randomized content, etc., for all 7. Very, very difficult game, whether you're using the touchscreen to move the ship around with your finger or whether you're using controllers. The fact that it is random and the fact that it is rough means I haven't been able to get past the 3rd level in this game, and I've been playing it since about the time it was released in July of 2018. So for people that like a challenge, Dan, I'm looking at you, Mr. Lawton. You might find this game a lot of fun to play. The cool thing about it is that, so your ship is basically a DeLorean. The doors are open, and those are the wings of the ship, and where the time machine stuff on the back would go, there's just a singular kind of jet that propels you through space. And as you build up your black hole energy meter, whatever it's called, you can call the Black Paradox into action, and that is a duplicate, kind of blackish red version of your DeLorean that just pops into existence for a little while. It's kind of like a helper ship, and it's got its own randomized weapon, and it will help you fight against the enemies, and then once the meter drains totally down, it will disappear and you'll be back on your own again. So it's kind of cool. It's a fun way to use some backup instead of having like a bomb or a screen clearing mechanic. You get this little helper that you can bring in every once in a while. The meter builds up as you destroy more enemies as you go through the game. As you defeat enemies, you earn money, and the earned money can be used in the garage, in between levels, or after you die to purchase microchips that will give your ship extra abilities, which you need because it's one of those kind of games, like most roguelites are, where you need to kind of power yourself up in order to give yourself an advantage as you go through the game. Definitely recommend it. A lot of fun, especially if you like quick pick 'em up, shoot 'em up kind of games, and the awesome synthwave soundtrack will keep you going forever and ever. Alright, last track of the show is coming up next. This was kind of a last minute addition. It's a game that I had not heard about until it popped up on my radar and thought it looked really cool, and I really, really liked the soundtrack. So we're going to listen to... so it's called... The file is called Tim Carr with ARP, because the soundtrack isn't available online anywhere, and I had to kind of hack into the game to find the sound files. So we'll go with that for now. Composed by Robert Przicki. We'll go with Przicki. Another Polish developed game with a Polish composer. So the game is called Liberated, released in 2020, and again, Tim Carr with ARP. Really, really good beats in this one. We'll be right back. Okay, so maybe not the most dynamic of tunes, but man, I could listen to that beat all friggin' day long. That was Tim Carr with ARP from Robert Przicki from the game Liberated. And Robert, if you're listening to this, I apologize for butchering your name. Please forgive me. Anyway, yeah, so this game has kind of a dynamic soundtrack in a sense. I played the part where this track takes place and the volume raises and lowers, and it almost seems like the EQ changes depending on what's going on the screen. You don't necessarily hear it in its quote-unquote raw form like this. It really kind of blends into the action quite well. You kind of have to see it to understand what I'm talking about, but I really, really love that heavy hip-hop beat. Very kind of urban, rough sounding. The reason why this is called Tim Carr with ARP is because there's another sound file for the game just called Tim Carr, and you don't have that kind of arpeggiated boom, kind of keyboard line going through it. It makes it feel a little more empty. I think that arpeggio really fills the song out, makes it feel like a good groove. Fantastic background music. This game is a very, very recent release. Actually only came out, I think, less than a week ago as of this recording. And the description of the game is what really drew me in. It's an action-adventure game that unfolds across the pages of a comic book, seamlessly merging the art of hand-drawn graphic novels with interactivity and side-scrolling action. It's a revolutionary combination of video games and comics. So, revolutionary, maybe? I mean, I'm sure classic gamers out there remember Comics Zone on the Genesis, and that's very, very similar to what this game is doing. But the game itself isn't as much of a fun, colorful beat-em-up romp as Comic Zone was. This is a much more serious tale of government and media control, and makes me think of a lot of the stuff that's going on in China with human rights right now. So the official description of the storyline from the game reads, "In this near-future dystopia, the eerily familiar always-on society gives way to complete government control, all in the name of safety. But in the midst of it all, an insurgent group known as Liberated rises." So basically, the government controls and oversees your entire social media presence. You can be detained by the police for not posting on social media enough, not making enough of your life available for them to see. And if you are not an open book on the internet, they feel like you're hiding something, and so you'll be on their watch list. It's just another way for Big Brother to watch you at all times. So you play as a character whose father is the head of the Ministry of Security, who kind of oversees all of this Big Brother government watchy stuff. But you are a hacker, and you've changed your identity, and you get caught by the police for not attending a mandatory webinar or something like that. You're told to go to your house and stay there and wait for the authorities to come. So you run back to your apartment and wipe your laptop clean because you've got some bad stuff on there, and things kind of escalate from there. You run out of your apartment as the police are coming in, and a car rolls up to you from the road, and a man's like, get in, I'll save you from all the craziness that's going on. And you kind of have to decide whether or not you want to run or you want to get in the car. I chose to get in the car, and the guy who picks you up, his name is Tim. So that's why the file is called Tim Carr. And Tim is a member of the Liberated. He takes you to their kind of base of operations, and you learn all about what they're all about. Their ideals match with yours, and so you join them and go on these missions to kind of take down government watchtowers and security checkpoints and stuff to kind of sabotage all of this Big Brother stuff that's going on. It seems really cool. The gameplay feels like a, I don't know, flashback meets run and gun, kind of, in a sense. There's some Blackthorn style stuff in there too, which you can hide in alcoves as police officers walk by and then kind of jump out and, you know, silently disarm them as their backs are turned to you. So a lot of really cool stuff. The game is it's a black and white comic, so the game is all devoid of color. There's really nicely hand-drawn art panels which seamlessly kind of flow into 3D polygonal side-scrolling gameplay with art that's extremely similar to the hand-drawn stuff. So it's a very cohesive package. Really cool, like I said, dynamic soundtrack. There's, I think, 5 issues, so like 5 levels in the game, and I think there's 2 DLC comic book issues, which are basically 2 DLC levels that you can purchase once you've beaten the first 5. So a game to look out for. Definitely check it out. Like I said, it's on Steam. You can get it on Switch as well. It's by Atomic Wolf Games, who also developed a game called Mad Age and This Guy, which was released on the Switch in 2017. So if you're familiar with that one, I've never heard of it, but it's a mix of Bomberman and a steampunk puzzle game, which sounds fun. So if you're familiar with that, these guys are the same dudes that made Liberated. And as far as the composer goes, he's a co-founder of Walkabout, who are the publishers of the game, and he lives in Warsaw, Poland. That's about all the information I have on him. Anyways, very big soundtrack. All I attempted to extract were the files from the first level of the game, and there were like 40 different music files. Many of them were full-length 2 and 3 minute songs, so multiply that by 5 for the other issues of the comic, and then 7 for the 2 DLCs beyond that. And this is a gigantic soundtrack, so I'm really looking forward to playing the rest of it and seeing what other kinds of music he's created for it. Alright, that pretty much does it for the show. I hope you guys enjoyed the music. I hope you maybe found some other cool games to play while you're sitting home by yourselves on the weekend, unable to go, I don't know, bowling or whatever it is that you guys do when we're not all wearing masks and stuff. And if you guys know of any cool indie games that are similar to the ones I've shared that you think I might enjoy, please let me know. Hit me up on Facebook. You can go to facebook.com/group/thevgembassy and talk with me there. Find me on Twitter at thevgembassy or on Instagram at thevgembassy. Head over to thevgembassy.com and check out the widget column on the right side of the page, and that's where you'll find a link to our Discord, which is, I guess, the primary social media spot for the VG Embassy. Lots and lots of friends, VG ambassadors, and other guests and hosts of other VGM podcasts hang out at the old Discord channel. Love to see you there, hanging out with me as well. I'd like to thank Indira J for the art, and Trevin Hughes, aka Dread, for the podcast theme song, and, as always, our lovely Patreon patrons. You can head over to patreon.com/thevgembassy. Check out the tiers that I've got there. For very small donations per month, you can get some pretty cool extra stuff. Hopefully soon we will be reviving Embassy exclusive once it's safe to all get back together again. Like I said, Joe was battling cancer and his treatment is almost up, so I'm hoping he'll be back to full strength soon and we can get back to doing some cool stuff. I do know that he will be appearing on a VG Embassy via remote recording very, very soon. So, anyways, a huge thanks to our Patreon patrons at the Taurus level: Cameron Childs, aka Bruce Irons of the Mad Gear, Michael Bridgewater from Forever Sound Version, Donovan Orofino, and Chris Murray. Our VG emissaries: Chris Myers, John Jekyll, aka Mixix Master, Ben the Diet Dishman from the Diet Presents, a VGM podcast, Chris Dienerson from the VG Jam podcast, Jordan Worma from the Table to Stage podcast, David Parrish, Bedroth from the Very Good Music podcast, Gannon11, aka Mike Stark from the Norwalk Gamer Symphony Orchestra, and our audio attaché members: Cameron Worma, Carlos from the Heroes 3 podcast, Scott McElhone, Dan Lawton, and Grioki. Our special agents: Volt Supreme from Volt Supreme Synth, VGM, Dream Stream, Machine, and Ryan Steele. And of course, our VG ambassador, the patron saint of VGM podcasts, Alex the Messenger from a VGM Journey podcast. All right, boys and girls, we'll see you again in another 2 weeks with another hopefully liberating episode of the VGMbassy. Take care, everyone.